September 3rd, and the night in Moscow feels like a war zone. Flamingo missiles are flying toward Moscow.
Here comes the second drone. A lot of them are flying toward the city.
Shit, it hit right on target. Oh, the second one. There.
But seriously, what is that? A drone, right? 700 drones, storm shadows, Neptunes all over Russia, sirens wailing in Moscow and St. Petersburg. Trump is giving Ukraine missiles that can reach Moscow and St. Petersburg.
That's it. Now the third one is on fire, too. That blue one caught fire. The main thing is, I went out to hang the laundry. I didn't see anything. Oh, Lord, have mercy.
In Tula, the design bureau that manufactures missiles for the MLRS is on fire. In Dubna, the Kronstadt plant has been attacked again.
Well, I understand they have one target, Kronstadt, the UAV plant.
And in Lukovici, a direct hit on the aircraft factory where MiGs are assembled.
Now there's smoke.
Aircraft delivered a massive strike with missiles and drones on defense enterprises.
Let's hit it now.
Oh, you can see it well.
That's a whole cloud of smoke.
Moscow region, Tula, Kursk, Tver, explosions and smoke everywhere. The authorities are jamming communications and the internet. The FSB is tightening security measures against sabotage. Muscovites are in a panic.
Oh, fuck, there's about to be a shockwave. You'd better duck.
What's going on there? It probably overheated.
The power plant is on fire. So there's a substation there.
And in Crimea, there's panic. A 26-kilometer traffic jam at the exit. Ukrainian missiles are flying toward Jankoy.
This is fucked up.
This isn't a single strike, it's a new phase of the war. And it's only just beginning. We'll discuss it with Roman Svitan.
This isn't a thunderstorm. I thought it was. No, it's not.
Yeah, a second drone just arrived.
Breaking news, friends. 300 to 700 drones, storms, and Neptunes, sirens wailing all across Russia. Trump is sending Ukraine missiles that can reach Moscow and Tatarstan. Gas pipelines in Siberia have been blown up. The Kstovo oil refinery is burning. The Russian fleet is under attack. After the web strike on Russian airfields, there's an urgent construction of bunkers. In the skies over Belarus, it's a drone war. Helicopters are shooting down Russian drones. Collapse in Crimea. 2,000 cars are currently lined up at the Kerch Bridge. There's a missile threat there. The long-range Neptune is in action. And the American Institute for the Study of War reports that there is panic in the Kremlin, and Putin is asking Trump not to interfere with the offensive in eastern Ukraine. We'll discuss this new phase of the war, and this phase is already blazing over Moscow, with well-known military analyst Roman Svitan. Roman Grigorievich, welcome.
Thank you. Wishing everyone good health.
Roman Grigorievich. Leaks from the Pentagon. The US is supplying Ukraine with long-range missiles that can reach all the way to Moscow. So should the rashists get ready?
Well, we need to understand what kind of missiles we're talking about. So what missiles could the United States, for example, provide us with that could reach Moscow? Well, first there's the PRS-M. This is a ballistic missile with a range of 500 kilometers, which can be launched from the HIMARS systems we already have. This is one of the missiles that can reach Moscow with a range of 500 kilometers. There's also the JASSM missile for the F-16. There are also modifications that can go up to 950 kilometers and 500 to reach Moscow, so they can reach as well. So what other missile could the US, for example, provide us with based on the launches we already have? It's important to understand, these missiles can't just be launched from a slingshot. Although the Russians tried to launch an ATGM from a slingshot, they just didn't have enough elastic from their underwear. Here's a question. We obviously need to use the missiles with launchers. The primary launchers we currently possess are the F-16, specifically utilized for deploying the JASSM missile, and for instance the HIMARS system, which is employed for the PRS-M. Let's see. It wouldn't be bad, and there's definitely hope, especially now that Graham has really gotten going, so to speak. In other words, this is someone who truly supports us. If only Trump would bring back his team from his first term like Pompeo and Bolton, that old hardline Republican team, those are the hawks who would tear Moscow apart in no time. The question is, for now, Witkoff and his associates are still dragging their feet over there. While they're still dragging their feet, these people remain outsiders, but I think the process has started for the most part. Most likely things will move from rhetoric to action, and then we'll see what happens. One possibility is that Trump is now trying to pressure Putin to resolve the Middle Eastern issue he promised regarding Iran. But Iran is holding out. Iran is already telling the Russians to get lost on some issues, realizing that the Russians will betray them again. That's why Trump may have no other option now but to actually give us missiles, and then we'll see where we launch them. But the first target, of course, would be Moscow, the Kremlin. The second target would be oil refineries. And the third, Crimea, the Kerch Bridge, and all the military facilities in Crimea that are trapped between the two seas.
Russian war correspondents have already officially reported 300 to 700 drones, Storm Shadows, Neptunes, sirens will be wailing all over Russia in the near future. They're expecting a large-scale missile and drone offensive. Dear audience, please like this video. And in the comments, let us know what you expect from the new phase of the war. Do you really believe all of this will happen? Roman Grigorievich, regarding these statements from Russian war correspondents, why are they writing this? Are they really afraid today? Because last week they were writing about thousands of drones heading for Moscow and St. Petersburg. Now they've written about 300, 700 drones, Storm Shadow, Neptunes, and Moscow, St. Petersburg. Get ready.
But the thing is, Trump loves performances, these kinds of shows with lots of spotlights, some fire shows, and so on and so forth. He announced that there would be a statement about Russia. And the Russians, of course, applying this so-called meme of the great artist to him, are predicting that indeed, under his statement about Russia, under the current pressure on Russia, we might be able to accomplish a certain task. Moreover, it could have been initiated by Trump himself, especially recently. So all of this could be connected to these actions. That's what Russian bloggers are planning, or rather predicting. Therefore, from the perspective of an artistic delivery, it's right to make such predictions, because then we can put on some pretty serious fireworks, let's say, based on the relatively small number of drones that have recently flown into Russia. Since only a few dozen have been sent, but we can produce more, it means they're being stockpiled somewhere. And naturally, this is aimed at the heart of Moscow, or rather at the heart of the Kremlin, I would say. And in principle, if I were in the Russians' shoes right now, especially after Trump's statement about Russia, I'd be careful not to stick my neck out any further than the nearest bomb shelter.
Friends, please like this video. Let us know in the comments what you think about our tandem with Roman Grigorievich 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Roman Grigorievich, here's another interesting piece of news. Gas pipelines in Siberia have been blown up. They say it's yet another special operation. 3,000 kilometers from Moscow, and suddenly, out of nowhere, Siberia is under fire, the gas pipeline is burning. What do you think about this?
These are our concerned citizens. How many times have we already thanked our concerned citizens, those who understand, in order to bring down the Russian Empire, in order for those republics that Moscow once grabbed to break free from this Moscow oppression, we need to destroy the main so-called clay feet of this colossus. Well, a colossus with feet of clay. So these clay feet are Russia's oil industry, which is why it is burning and will continue to burn. This is just the beginning. Here it is, the beginning of this Russian end. If the whole world joins in, if everyone, wherever they are, sees some oil rig, some gas pipeline, anything connected to the Russian oil industry, the oil and gas sector, and starts to set it on fire, believe me, the Russian colossus will collapse just like the Soviet Union once did. The optimal option is to break it down from the inside using exactly these kinds of mechanisms, which is what we're talking about right now. Indeed, pipelines are burning now, and they're burning quite easily. Our concerned people are taking care of these issues. They simply set fire to stubble or so-called dry grass through which the gas and oil pipelines run and put them out of commission. Somewhere something breaks, somewhere it explodes, somewhere it burns, and somewhere it just stops because there's a fire risk. So these kinds of mechanisms that are being used now, they're not indifferent, they're actually very effective. In terms of effectiveness, they're comparable, let's say, to the work of our long-range strike capabilities.
We always talk about the need to attack oil refineries. We've been heard because just in the past day, there was a strike on the oil refinery in Kstovo. Everything is ablaze there. The storage tanks were attacked. Roman Grigorievich, what kind of damage is there now? How do you assess the current operations against the oil refineries?
Well, Kstovo is further south along the Volga, on the right bank from Nizhny Novgorod, just a few dozen kilometers away. It really is one of Russia's major refineries. It processes 17 million tons of oil per year, making it one of the top 10 oil refineries in Russia. We've already struck in the Kstovo area and we hit the target there. Before that, we targeted the bitumen, specifically the bitumen receiving facility. That's also one of the ways to stop an oil refinery. The thing is, at any oil refinery, during production, when processing oil, fuel oil is produced as a sort of secondary layer and it has to be disposed of somewhere. The fuel oil receivers, which every refinery has, are constantly overflowing and the fuel oil is taken away somewhere, meaning it's used somewhere else. Mainly that's for bitumen production. So if you strike at the fuel oil or bitumen, you can basically block the refinery. And these strikes have already happened before. We once talked about strikes on the bitumen receiver, but as for the plant itself, there haven't been any for a long time. How long has it been? We've been saying for about 4 months now that it's about time to finally take action. And whether it was us or not who were heard, most likely a decision was made to continue the so-called sanitation operations. Who exactly carried them out is no longer that important. The Ukrainian Defense Forces. Nevertheless, serious damage was inflicted on the plant in Kstovo. The Russian authorities attempted to cover it up, meaning they did not release any official information whatsoever, but you simply cannot fool the vast and interconnected internet. The sheer number of videos and extensive footage now readily available online clearly shows that it was indeed a successful and impactful strike.
Another important topic, after the SBU's web operation, Russia began urgently building bunkers and hangars at its airfields, according to the American Institute for the Study of War. At the airbase in Koluno-Kursk region, 10 fortified bunkers, 12 concrete shelters, and 8 hangars have appeared. Similar structures are being built at the Saki airfield in Crimea. We remember that as a result of the special operation, Ukrainian drones struck 41 Russian strategic aviation aircraft. Roman Grigorievich, the floor is yours.
Well, from a security standpoint, it's the right move to provide cover, for example, against drones, but only those with a small payload. Kalino and Saki, there are about a dozen airfields where the Russians are now trying to rebuild, some with embankments, some with actual bunker enclosures. There are certain mechanisms in place, but these are not underground or rock-based structures, for example. In other words, there are mechanisms. We'll find ways to set fire to or damage a Russian aircraft, even if it's in a certain shelter. If one person invents something, another will definitely find a way to break it. He just needs to rack his brain first to figure out how to do it. I think we'll find the mechanisms. But the optimal mechanism, of course, is long-range missiles. Those are the ones Trump is threatening to give us. Or, well, from under Trump at the moment, because those same JSSMs with warheads of several hundred kilograms will definitely break open almost any ground shelter, no matter what kind of aircraft is hidden inside. So we'll wait. There is hope for Trump that he will come to his senses now, or at least not exactly come to his senses, but for him, Ukraine is a kind of club to hit Putin over the head with. And right now, he actually needs that since things are not going well for the United States in the Middle East.
The number of vehicles in line at the Kerch Bridge has exceeded 2,000. All this is happening to the sound of sirens. Long-range Neptunes are attacking the occupied peninsula, reports Crimean Wind and other telegram channels. At the moment, there are 1,500 vehicles on the Taman side and more than 715 on the Kerch side waiting in line. Roman Grigorievich, what does this indicate? And let's talk about our conspiracies in Crimea.
Well, not 2000, but 2001. The thing is, that vehicle probably arrived at Budanov's, he counted 2,000, passed it on, and then we put it into the information stream with you after having some coffee in Yalta. And in principle, we can use the information from the main intelligence directorate at this point. So 2000 plus 1, that's Budanov. He's back there standing in line, and he organized and straightened out all that Russian business. But in reality, the Russians are having a real panic right now. They're panicking because, first of all, they've worked themselves up into this hysteria. They understand perfectly well that lately, it's not for nothing that we haven't been striking Russia with a large number of missiles or drones. There's a certain buildup happening. As we discussed before, the optimal way to break through the Russian frontal air defense is with a large number of drones. And now they feel that it's almost about to happen. All the more so now, given Trump's statements. So I'll repeat this once again, especially, and I emphasize, especially for all ethnic Ukrainians, please try to stay much closer to designated bomb shelters and absolutely do not ignore the crucial air raid alerts. This important message only applies to ethnic Ukrainians who are currently living within Russia. We still remember you and your situation in this regard, and we are thinking of you. As for bloggers making a fuss right now, well, there are reasons for that. There really are reasons.
Germany will not supply Taurus missiles to Ukraine, the country's defense minister announced. Pistorius also stated that Berlin has already delivered 3 out of the 12 existing Patriot systems to Ukraine. There are only 6 left in Germany, 2 more systems were provided to Poland, and 1 is constantly unavailable due to maintenance or training. That's very few, the minister says. Especially considering NATO's objectives that we must achieve, we definitely can't give away more. I plan to discuss with Pentagon Chief Austin my preliminary initiative to allow Germany to purchase 2 Patriot systems from the US for Ukraine. Roman Grigorievich, why did the Germans decide not to give us the Taurus missiles? And how important will the negotiations with the Pentagon really be so that Germany can buy Patriot systems from the US for us?
Well, they carefully looked at precisely how Russia's partners are actively helping it, if you can truly call them that. For example, the Chinese, operating under the guise of Geran, are supplying essential parts from their own Podsolnuk 200 inches systems. And so you now get the Geran 2, the Geran 3, and now there is also the Harpy and the Fury. These are all produced in Izhevsk. They are basically the very same Chinese models, but they are now branded as Russian made. The same goes for the Israelis. They built the four-post, for example. It's an Israeli drone, long range and heavy, which under the name four-post, the Russians are now using against us. It's the same story with the Lancet. It's the Israeli Hero 400, but the Lancet is the Russian version. So it seems like the Russians, the Israelis, and the Chinese are all supposedly not involved, but it's Russian Gerans, the same Furies, Harpies, and Gerans, plus Lancets and four-posts that are flying at us. And they all act as if they're not involved. This is exactly the path that Germany has most likely taken as well. We'll be supplied with the same Taurus missiles only in disassembled form. We'll just screw in 3 or 4 bolts, but there will be a bucket of paint and a stencil say Taurus, not Taurus, but Taurus. And our Tauruses will fly where they need to, exactly where the Tauruses would have gone. That's the kind of approach they're taking. Well, if that's convenient for our German partners, for example, then why not use it after all and strike the Russians this way? Plus, there's the question of, say, supplying us with certain types of air defense weapons like the Patriot system or the same missiles for the Patriot. The fact that the Germans have now practically taken on the responsibility for security, first of all, through their own production, they've launched a production line for PAC-3, like the Spaniards. They looked at the Spaniards, and it's a very smart decision. In other words, it's better to produce consumables domestically. Starting next year, we will begin receiving missiles, anti-missiles, specifically the PAC-3 anti-ballistic missiles for Patriots, from this very production line in Germany. In addition, Germany is now trying, at the very least, to buy up several of those same Patriots from the United States. They took some of the Patriots from Israel for replenishment, but yes, they returned them since there are certain relations with Israel. By the way, once these Patriots are brought up to standard, the EU or Germany could pay for them to be delivered to us. They might also purchase a certain batch of Patriot missiles, which are very important to us right now. In other words, the Federal Republic of Germany is now directly and actively involved in ensuring not only its own national defense capability and security, but also that of the entire European Union, and naturally the comprehensive security of all of Europe under our, so to speak, careful and deliberate guidance, and with our established mechanisms for providing this essential security and stability. So you could say that Germany is now becoming the main driving force in ensuring Europe's security. But what's most interesting and beneficial for us is that they see us as one of the main cornerstones in ensuring the security of the eastern borders. And that's good for us. There will be Patriots, there will be Patriot missiles, there will also be long-range Taurus systems, which are very similar to Taurus missiles and so on. The main thing is that they send us a bucket of paint because we can't give our guys money for the rods. But if they send a bucket, at least that'll be enough for several dozen stencils.
Roman Grigorievich, then there's this information that came out literally at the end of last week. The armed forces of Ukraine will receive the first Ukrainian long-range missiles, which were funded by Germany. What kind of long-range missiles are we talking about?
Well, these could very well be those very same Taurus missiles. So the question of how all this will be transferred, how it will be, say, formalized, that's another matter. It all depends, especially since all of this will be decided behind closed doors. If it's behind closed doors, we're unlikely to find out from our own or German information sources. The Russians will immediately start making noise about it, just like they're now making noise about the use of our Neptunes and Storm Shadows in Crimea. They'll also make noise about the use of the Taurus missiles, somehow finding German spare parts there. The Russians will even find Hitler's business card there, 100%, just to show a connection to fascist Germany from the last millennium for the sake of their information campaign. Well, look, we'll discuss this issue later.
As for Putin, as I understand it, during his last conversation with Trump, he made a statement asking Trump not to interfere with the offensive in eastern Ukraine. He needs a few more months to reach the borders that he has written into the constitution. How do you assess these statements? And certainly, what are Russia's current capabilities for a military offensive, the autumn campaign?
This is nothing new for us. For several months now, for the second year, we've been talking about the fact that Putin's offensive plan is set out in the legal framework. It is enshrined in the Russian constitution. They have added 5 of our regions, Luhansk, Donetsk, Zaporizhia, Kherson, and Crimea, to their constitution, and naturally they will try to seize them one by one. By the way, they took Crimea back in 2014, and they recently captured the Luhansk region, pushing us out from near Bilohorivka. So you could say that right now almost the entire Luhansk region has been captured by Russian forces, and this plan, we've talked about it billions of times. In other words, they are systematically trying step by step to push our troops beyond the administrative borders of these regions. So there's really nothing new to say here, especially after us. But the question of capabilities, that's a different matter. At the moment, the Russians don't have the capabilities. Without the number of reserves they're trying to bring in for a second wave, they simply don't have them right now. Why does this summer offensive seem so sluggish? Some of our politicians have already started joyfully claiming that it's all fizzled out, that the Russian offensive is over, and so on and so forth. No, it's just a sluggish start. Why? Because by May 9th, they had practically exhausted all their reserves, dealing with some political issues ahead of that date. They simply didn't have enough reserves for the start of the summer campaign. But the second wave will come around August or September. These are exactly those 60 days that some publications are now mentioning in the conversation between Putin and Trump. That's the second wave in September. And we need to be ready for this wave, not to give up, not to get carried away by a wave of euphoria just because the Russians had a poor start. In that sense, they haven't even started yet, if we count by offensive operations, because the main reserves of the second wave haven't arrived. These could include North Koreans as well. Definitely, either directly or, for example, through rotation, about 100 to 120,000 Russians deployed in the Kursk and Belgorod directions will move to the Eastern Front. That's why Putin this summer, or rather in this summer campaign, which may only end with the onset of frost, will spend several months trying to push our troops further out of Donetsk and Zaporizhia regions. We can't afford to relax. We need to get the security forces into action. We need to request a sufficient amount of military aid from our partners. They are providing it now, and we are very grateful to them overall, and we must participate in these processes to prevent Putin from capturing Donbas and Zaporizhia. Because he has already captured Luhansk, we have already lost the Luhansk region. So that leaves Donetsk region, and we can emphasize once again that we still have the opportunity to stop him in various ways without destroying the rear. Here, for example, there is hope for Trump because we need at least 1,000-kilometer range missiles, at least 1,000 kilometers, so that we could reach in terms of radius from somewhere near Moscow to the Volga and even to the Caucasus. Why? Because we also need to work on the North Caucasus. There are many military facilities there, including the Mozdok airfield. In other words, there are plenty of targets to hit. The main issue is the number of Russian agents operating on Ukrainian territory who are committing a huge number of war crimes, acts of treason, and collaboration against our country, Ukraine. And how can Ukrainian special services work with these traitors, these war criminals today? Right now, the special services need to generate measures related to complete internal control within the country over people who are passing through in transit or arriving here from third countries. This also needs to be understood. It's not just Russians who can pose a threat to us, really, anyone could for that matter. For example, it could be Azerbaijanis, like that couple who came here. So first of all, the special services need to draft laws, and secondly, they must urgently stop the advancement of this unconstitutional law on dual citizenship. In the same way, people from other countries could come here and by obtaining Ukrainian citizenship settle here as well. And then how will you catch them? After they commit a crime, what will you say to the victims' families then? Well, okay, let's say you caught them, not just caught them, even shot them. No questions asked, but you can't bring back a life. And that's a big problem for our people, our special services, our operatives who still have a lot of work ahead of them. The liquidation operation in Russia will continue for another 10 to 15 years after our victory. And to avoid running into such problems, these issues must be resolved internally, no question about it. They shouldn't be coming here. We shouldn't have people from other third countries here, and especially not such problematic entries. Roman Grigorievich, what should we do with collaborators? A huge number of Ukrainians work for the FSB for money, and they themselves point out targets. This is simply betrayal. And what percentage of Ukrainians are working for the Russian Federation, for the FSB? In 2014, in the significant city of Donetsk, after the Russian forces began their extensive entry into the Donbas region, a specific and crucial organization was thoughtfully created to effectively counter the emerging military threats. At that particular time, I was serving as the dedicated advisor to the governor on all military affairs within the broader Donetsk region. So in this so-called operational headquarters, in the operational headquarters that was created to address issues of countering the Russians, there were a lot of our local people, supposedly from the SBU, the Ministry of Internal Affairs, the police, as it was called back then, and so on. Well, these policemen, these so-called policemen, later handed me over to the Russian GRU officers. So that's the kind of insidious fifth column we have operating inside. More than 10,000 of these very same Donetsk police officers, in an incredibly swift flash, completely switched over to wearing Russian caps, adorned with that distinctive double-headed imperial cockade. Consequently, this deeply troubling situation hasn't truly gone anywhere or been resolved after all, and continues to be a significant concern. In 2022, hundreds of police officers switched to the Russian side, including the SBU, including those structures essentially that are supposed to ensure security. It's good that now Malyuk has worked with his counterintelligence people there. First, they cleaned out the SBU. Now they're trying to clean up other areas. Well, we have a lot of these problems. It's not even just about collaborators. These are outright traitors who work for, whether for money or not, as informants for the Russian special services. But they definitely exist, and this needs to be fought against. Our special services need to deal with it, of course, getting involved. But we have a whole problem here. There are several structures that have remained practically untouched since 2014, like the Ministry of Internal Affairs, which still hasn't been reformed. They created the police. The national police was incorporated into the Ministry of Internal Affairs. So what was the point of creating the police if the Ministry of Internal Affairs was left as it was? How many more traitors like that are still there? Let me repeat, in 2014 there were more than 10,000, and in 2022 there are definitely hundreds of thousands. How many are still left? And it's the same story across all the special services and in every direction. This is a big problem for us. And Maluik's counterintelligence still has a lot of work to do. The guys are already exhausted and sweating from all this work. So of course everyone needs to help in every way possible. But this is specialized work, and it's very difficult for people who don't have specific knowledge in this area to handle it. That's why everything needs to be cleaned out thoroughly.
Finally, Roman Grigorievich, a Belarusian helicopter shot down a Russian attack drone that was flying toward Ukraine. According to RBC Ukraine, this happened when a Belarusian air defense Mi-24 helicopter attacked and destroyed a Russian Gerber-type attack UAV that was heading toward Ukraine on July 12th. Were they just defending their own airspace?
They were defending their oil refineries from a retaliatory strike by Ukrainian MLRS, which can definitely reach the Moldzyr oil refinery. It's only 40 to 50 kilometers away, and we have Smerch systems that could completely wipe out the refinery. Russian, actually Belarusian. Naturally, for any reason, basically, if drones start coming at us from Belarus, no one will even ask why we started striking back. Because Russians were already coming in from Belarus in 2022. So it doesn't matter how or by what means the Belarusians will ensure the security of our borders shared with Belarus. In this way, in this manner, their main responsibility should be to prevent Russian drones from entering their territory, not to launch these drones into our territory. They should be involved in intercepting these Russian drones at the Russian-Belarusian border, not just at the Belarusian-Ukrainian border. That is, only in this way will they ensure their own security, the security of their economy. And as for us burning it down, well, let Lukashenko have no doubt right away, as soon as anything like what happened in 2022 or any kind of Geran drone comes from the Belarusian side into our territory.
Dear audience, Roman Grigorievich and I are working for you, for audiences all over the world, so that they know the truth about Russian aggression and Russia's war against Ukraine. We would like as many people as possible around the world to support Ukraine and stand on the side of light. That's why every like, every comment, and every subscription helps ensure that as many people as possible around the world see this video. We work on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Dear audience, please subscribe to my YouTube channel and leave a few kind words in the comments in support of Roman Grigorievich, the armed forces of Ukraine, and our partnership. Roman Grigorievich, thank you. And as always, see you on Wednesday.
Goodbye.